And we're
Hey,
live.
all right. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Omer Q Show. It is Saturday, January 23rd, 2021. We are live from various undisclosed locations on the East Coast. I'm your host, Omer Qureshi, and I'm joined, as always, by my super producer, best friend, and Bernie meme enthusiast, Marcus Webster. Let's get a shot of the webcam, Marcus. How you doing?
Hey, we're doing great.
Oh, and we have a special guest joining us in the studio with Marcus, Senator Bernie Sanders. How you doing, Senator?
And he has a metal chair that he's using to sit.
Oh yeah, well yeah. How dare he have a metal chair? You know, it's pretty elitist of him to have a chair when
Yeah.
multiple people are dying in this country of healthcare. How dare you, Bernie? How dare you?
Gotta love it. You gotta love that outfit, though.
Totally. Today we're going to be discussing the role of the left during Joe Biden's presidency. We'll be talking about the different strategies the left can take, not only to hold Biden accountable for what he's already promised, but also make sure that we put pressure on him, party leadership, to support much needed policies like Medicare for all, Green New Deal, and other reforms that we desperately need. So let's start with the housekeeping this week, the news of the week. There was a lot of talk, obviously, and for obvious reasons, of the inauguration and Joe Biden's presidency and his swearing in. And while much of the DNC EU was focused on that and all the hoopla surrounding, there was something big that happened in New York that hasn't been talked about in the same light. So, for those who don't know, there was a strike at the Hunts Point food market in the Bronx, which is one of the major distribution and providers for vegetables and fruits in all the five boroughs of New York. In the past few months, workers have been working in COVID conditions, and they asked recently to get a higher wage. They asked for a $1 per hour raise because obviously they're getting paid to work during the pandemic. They are traversing all of the medical things that go along with that. They are facing all of these obstacles while they're going to work. So all they asked was in an hour, $1 an hour in raise, and that's it. Now management came back with them and offered 35 cents, a 35-cent raise, and obviously many of the workers saw it as a slap in the face and not in good faith. So in the end, they ended up striking, and just so you guys know and why this is important, this was one of the biggest, I think, demonstrations of a strike we've seen in recent memory that has actually succeeded, and I think can be a launching point for future action later on. Now, just some background about the situation behind the specifically the Hunt's food market. So the majority of the workers make an average of about, I believe it's $18 to $21 an hour, and many of them also make as little as $15 an hour. Now, when you're working in COVID, obviously, there has to be some sort of hazard pay. They haven't gotten that really, and you have to think about it like this: they asked for a $1 raise. This is one of the biggest food markets in the biggest city in the richest country in the world, and they wouldn't even give that $1 an hour raise to their workers. They also received $15 million in PPP money that's forgivable down the line. So there's really no reason. There's no excuse for them not to give them this raise. The only excuse is greediness, and they know that the workers will submit and just come to work. They want to make you submit. They want to make workers feel as if they have no other recourse and no other action to take. That's how corporations, that's how companies, that's how big business puts you down. That's how it's meant to keep you down. Now, the strikers obviously were not alone. They had support from one of the biggest and most popular members of Congress there are, Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, who the food market is in her district, skipped the inauguration actually to be out there. She got a lot of flack because people were saying that she wasn't at the inauguration. This is not a good sign of unity. But forget the fact that AOC was in her district, taking action and fulfilling the promise she made to the working class people of her district to not leave them behind in their time of need. And there's no more time of need than in this moment that her district needed her. Now the workers ended up coming to an agreement with management, and they provided a dollar and 85 cent. They were provided with $1.85 raise over 3 years. Now, obviously, that's not the dollar and raise immediately they wanted, but in addition to that, they also got the fact that they all of their medical expenses, their out of pocket medical expenses, were completely eliminated. So this actually was a huge win for workers. This agreement had 97% support from the workers, from the union. The Teamsters obviously played a huge part. Teamsters president in New York said that this was the biggest contract they had in years. This was one of the biggest moments in the history, in modern history, of union striking and this type of activism. And and I really do think that if the left wants to move forward in the Biden administration, and we'll talk about, how this specifically we can use this energy and this same type of organizing to put pressure on politicians later. But Marcus, I do want to ask you one thing. So, as I laid it out there, there was, and this all happened quickly, by the way. As I laid it out there, there were a lot of steps that led up to this. What do you think is the biggest takeaway from this particular strike and what happened in New York?
Well, I think there's a lot of key takeaways from the situation. One, you always see this on Facebook where people are saying, well, you can't raise the minimum wage, or the price of milk will cost $15, or the price of gas will go up to this outrageous amount, or the prices will increase by 500, 600%. And that's not what you're going to see. When people
Right.
have $15 minimum wages, as they do in a lot of metropolitan areas in the United States, you can still go to Taco Bell, or, not to advertise for them. Taco Bell is not sponsoring this statement, but you can go to Taco Bell. You can still get your dollar bean rice cheese burrito. I know, because I've had way too many of those. You can still go to McDonald's and get your McChickens, although they get a little cheeky, and some McChickens cost $1.50, but let's not get into that. My point being is, you're not going to see outrageous price increases by increasing someone's minimum wage or by paying your workers more. When you look at the business cost of it, right? Businesses pay about 20% of their, outgoing money, their expenses. That's the average business is going to be 20% when it comes to workers and wages. So if that 20% becomes 21 or 22%, that's not going to affect the price in these dramatic ways that conservatives say that it will. But also, we need to focus. This isn't just one chain. This is a problem that is going on across the country. And
Absolutely.
luckily, these people had a congresswoman who really cares and gets, is willing to take steps to publicize and really emphasize these issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's in Chicago recently, there's a grocery chain called Mariano's, and they are they are served by Instacart, and they had a very similar situation where they unionized, and the union started standing up for these workers' rights, and they all got fired. Like,
Really?
every worker who unionized is no longer working for that chain, or is getting terminated in a very short term. So, this is going on all across the country, and unions are under attack.
Yeah.
This is
There's been a lot of union busting efforts lately.
Google, the tech sector, especially the companies, who use contract workers like Uber and Grubhub and Instacart, and I'm sure this grocery store, has, people who they see more as expendable. They can just replace them. Well, it's maybe they can replace them, right? Maybe they can from a business standpoint, but ethically, I don't think government should let them do that.
Right. And you hinted at this as well. You know, the first part is that AOC actually took time out of her schedule. She actually took time out of going to the inauguration to go and help this movement. And people want to say, "Oh, this is just performative." Well, there's performative politics that can, be just for the individual politician and work only to benefit them. This is a sign of performative and
With results.
yeah, it led to results. Thank you. It led to results. What happened? She goes there. Everyone's talking about it. CNN picks it up. Fox News even talked about this. Everyone started talking about it, and then it became a big deal. That's how you put pressure on these corporations. That's how you put pressure on these food markets. Like I said, this is the hunts. The hunter. This food market is the biggest food market in the biggest country in the richest in the biggest city in the richest country in the world, and they just got a huge loan, huge bailout of $15 million, and you're telling me that a $1 per hour raise is somehow not enough, or it's too much to ask for these workers who are risking their lives?
And it's reminiscent of what Bernie Sanders did with Amazon about 2 years ago, where he actually, he wasn't able to get a $15 minimum wage for everyone, but he went to the biggest companies and he got $15 minimum wages. It's something that if your politicians put pressure on these people, you're going to see results. Unfortunately, there's not enough politicians out there who do this, and I'd love to see more. Even on the conservative side, they have interest on these. There's conservatives who are all for the minimum wage as voters. Why aren't the politicians? Well, I could tell you it's money in politics,
Right.
but that's what we need. If we really want to solve these problems, we need politicians who go in and get the job done, whether it be on a small scale, a relatively small scale, or whether it be through legislation.
Right. And I think right now at this moment, we have the momentum. People sometimes forget the power of striking, because it really there's been a lot done recently, especially to kind of quell that type of behavior. It's now seen as, destructive if you strike, when in reality, striking actually shows where the actual power of a company, where the actual power of production lies. It lies with the workers. The power is the workers. If enough workers demand, what they want from those in power, they must capitulate. And that's what whenever people on the left say solidarity, it's not about, communism. It's not about socialism. It's literally about the working people fighting for what they want, because they are an instrumental part of the economy. They are the instrumental part of the economy, and they drive a lot of our companies. They just drive our prosperity. So, it's not, so it shouldn't be a sin to say that, we need to work in solidarity. We need to work on, organizing more strikes and threatening more strikes, actually, because that's how you build up this level of pressure on these companies to actually present and treat these workers in the right way.
Yeah.
It's like you can apply the same principle to a state or to a country. If you need something critical in your life, like healthcare or a living wage, forming a union, then society should empower you. The outstanding factors in society, those in power should empower you to demand it, but you also need to be willing to demand it yourself. And I think we've seen a lot of people scared of that, and that has to do with the economic insecurity in this country.
And we've seen in a lot of the topics that we've covered in episode 1 and 2
Mm-hmm.
that there are people in Trump's camp who economically share the vast majority of the opinions of,
Right.
When it comes to economics, minimum wage, Medicare, Social Security. These are all things that both Trump people and I dare say normal law-abiding citizens at this point, these two groups it's a Venn diagram, and that's in the middle, right?
Right.
These populist policies, if you call them that, policies that help the people of the country, right? Those are
Mm-hmm.
popular all across the board. And I think if we really want to see change, we have to get the people, the same politicians that kowtowed to Trump's ego for the past 4 years. It's time for them to feel the pressure when it comes to economic issues, because people in West Virginia want $15 minimum wage. If they're not framed in the polling to say, oh, do you want all of your prices to go up because of a $15 minimum wage?
Right.
If you look at the polling where it's asked in a reasonable way, where a reasonable person could just go either way without it being forced to the answer, you're going to see that a lot of Republicans, they don't mind $15 minimum wage. They don't mind more taxes to pay for universal health care. They definitely don't mind Social Security. They don't want any cuts to that.
Right. Dude, Florida, for all intents and purposes right now, is a red state, and they just passed a $15 minimum wage there. Republican governor, Republican senators, Republican. They voted Republican in the past two presidential contests. Granted, that was by a small margin, but still, they have a trend that they have a growing base of Republicans there. So if they can pass a $15 minimum wage, if $15 minimum wage can be popular in West Virginia, what does it tell you? It tells you that working people want their wages to go up because they need it. People can't survive. People want to say, "Oh, well, unemployment is down," or like that. That's the biggest thing they point to. Unemployment is down. People are getting hired. We added so and so new jobs. We never find out how many of those new jobs are second jobs that people got
Absolutely.
because they can't afford to put food on the table, because they can't afford to feed their kids. They can't afford to do what they need to survive.
Well, I'll
So,
say I
you know,
said it under Obama, and I said
mhm,
it under Trump, and I'll say it under Biden. The unemployment numbers that are published by the Bureau of Labor Statistics are trash. They cannot be
yep,
depended on for anything, right? There's people
hmm
who go back to school when they really can't afford to go back to school, taking loans to go back to school to try to get a graduate degree so that they can get a job. And in STEM, in engineering, in math, science, there are people who, for a myriad of different reasons, don't get hired because they don't have those networks, they don't have that wealth, they don't have the ability to take time of their life to get an internship that doesn't pay anything to get those connections, and
hmm
they're left behind, and especially in COVID, where you have people working uh, the app jobs such as Uber and Grubhub just to survive. That, yeah, they're not unemployed, but they are underemployed heavily.
for sure, for sure. Yeah, and and I guess the question going off of this, is how do we capture this momentum? How do we take advantage of this momentum? And because there is momentum, like you said, the New York Teamsters president said that this is the biggest contract in 30 years. So we have this very very indefinite amount of attention on this issue and momentum, and we need to find a way to make it, I think, like we need to find a way to organize more people to threaten this kind of action, because what the companies are going to do with places like Amazon, they're only going to enhance their union busting techniques. Now they're only going to hire more Pinkerton men, like Amazon is known to do. They literally hire Pinkerton men, private detectives, to bust workers
Yeah.
who are trying to form unions. This type of action is only going to get worse because of this. So we need to find a way as the working class to not only support workers, because the more the unions grow, one, the better our economy does, the more prosperous our country is, and also the more likely we are to be eventually part of a union, to be to benefit off of it, and to benefit from society. It just makes society better when those at the bottom have universal rights taken care of. And so I think, for me, I always want to point to, I think that we need to find a way to, because here's the thing though. At the end of the day, the one thing we have to realize is the establishment, whether a Republican, Democrat, they're really not going to touch this issue, because where does a lot of their money come from? It comes from Amazon. It comes from corporations. It comes from Raytheon through contracts, wherever you want to say. All the big corporations, they give the pharmaceutical industry. They give money so that politicians don't touch the union issue, so they don't pass union busting measures. Joe Biden has a bust of Rosa Parks and a bust of Cesar Chavez in the Oval Office now. There's big news. He just put it there, and CNN and MSNBC, they were fawning over it. They were like, "Oh, look how great Joe Biden is. He has a bust of Cesar Chavez in his office." And my thing is, okay, that's great. I really wish he started acting like he believed in what Cesar Chavez believed in, because Cesar Chavez was a leader of strikes all throughout the 60s, all throughout the 70s. He fought his entire life for the working class. And, Joe Biden, for almost his entire political career has been fighting for the opposite of that. People don't want to talk about it, but unfortunately, he's cuddled up to the pharmaceutical industries, he's cuddled up to the healthcare industries, he's cuddled up to all of these industries that oppress workers and that are notorious in hurting the general public.
Well, like
So,
AOC said, it's not time for brunch. Put down the bottomless mimosas. As much as it pains me to say it, we got to go out there and we got to do something about this. We got,
amen. Virtue, yeah.
we're going to shift. We went for the past 4 years. We've been fighting right, right, right. Now we got
Mm-hmm.
to fight center, center, center to move them left, left, left.
Big facts. Virtue signaling is meaningless when you're in power and you choose to not to empower those below you. Um, but I think that was a good start to the show. Marcus, do you have anything before we move on?
I think that covers my opinions on this. I think at the
All
end
right,
of the
cool.
day, we gotta convince. It comes a lot. People want to just dismiss the Trump people, and it's so tempting. They seem
Mm-hmm.
so lost. Like
Right.
uh, they're storming the Capitol. They're doing crazy things. It's so tempting to say these people are nuts, but
Right.
a lot of them voted for Obama. Wait, some
Yeah,
of them
right.
voted for Obama in 12.
And here's the thing. I see the argument. Like people want to make the argument that anyone who supports Trump at this point is beyond reach. And I think January 6th gave that argument a little more merit. But I think that saying blanketly every single person is wrong because not every single person showed up to overthrow the democracy. Not every single person showed up and actually did the action. There's one, it's kind of like that. You remember, Peck? Remember, like I think last year there was this whole movement to storm Area 51, and you had everybody talking about it on Twitter. And there's this huge movement. Everyone said they were going to be there, and who ended up being there?
The
It was
Naruto runners.
yeah, it was a small subsect of the people who said they were going to be there. So I think a lot of and we'll talk about Trumpism like in more in depth at a later point, but like what Trump was, and it's been said before, and no matter how much MSDNC doesn't want to hear it, it was a symptom of several systemic problems we've had and are still dealing with right now that we refuse to address.
And
It was
also,
income
where did racism help Trump? Racism helped Trump, and
yeah,
sexism helped Trump
yeah,
in
that's
in the,
true.
in the places that he was already going to win anyways. The things that hit the hardest, right? The things that got the people in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, the
Yeah,
Rust Belt states, Pennsylvania, Ohio, the things that got them onto Trump's side were the economics.
for sure.
And that's why, because as Hillary might want to blame Russia, and oh my gosh, she's still out there blaming Russia for things.
Oh, and Bernie, it was all Bernie's fault.
Bernie and Russia. That's what she says is the problem. But in reality, it's her economic history, right? She came out on all she was for all of the trade deals that lost these people their jobs. And
Right.
Biden had some hesitancy to it. His Pennsylvania instincts saved him, and that's the only reason he won in 2020, along with COVID. It's the
Well, yeah, yeah.
economic policies.
Right. And I think what buried Trump at the end of the day was the fact that he was a crisis maker and he couldn't handle a crisis. And like I said, that's the bare minimum you expect from your leaders, your president, whoever's in charge of that. It's the bare minimum. Like
Yep.
you need to not plunge the country into total chaos where 400,000 people are dying because of a pandemic. Um, but but yeah, we'll talk more about Biden on the other side of the break. If you haven't already, though, please remember to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever a new video is released. Also, check us out, oqpolitics.com. Going to be dropping some dope articles on there this week. If you want to submit an op-ed, also be sure to reach out. All the information's on the website, oqpolitics.com. In the meantime, we will see you on the other side of this break where we are going to be talking about Joe Biden and how the left can pressure him and hold him accountable for what he's already promised, but also hold him accountable for what we demand.
Yep, and we'll be taking a 5-minute break. Feel free to leave some comments in the chat. We'll read them all. And we're
Hey,
back.
hey. Oh, I almost talked over you. Hey, hey, welcome back to the Omer Q show. If you haven't already, remember to like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Next, we talked about the unions, we talked about striking, and we talked about Biden a little bit at the end there. Now we're going to be talking about Joe Biden's agenda and what the progressive agenda should be. Now, obviously, Joe Biden's agenda is very much of don't rock the boat, don't fundamentally change anything because nothing was wrong to begin with. And and here's the thing: a lot of people, when defending Biden's policies, when defending his lack of effort to actually want to change things, they point to Donald Trump and what he did. And to that, I say is a very easy argument against that. Is Donald Trump your baseline? Is that the standard we're setting? Because if that's the standard, in my opinion, it's a pretty shitty standard to have. If fascism is your line and anything above that is you feel like if you feel like anything above that is okay and justified and great, then you are living in an era of complacency, and complacency is how these special interests, is how the 1% that I like to talk about, is how all of these organizations, all of these companies, and all of the politicians and people in power who are working against working class people, which makes up the majority of Americans.
I mean, he's only been impeached twice.
Only been impeached twice,
only
Yeah,
twice.
Biden hasn't even been impeached once.
I mean,
Although Marjorie Taylor Greene is trying
has
her best.
entered the chat.
Oh God, and Omer Qureshi has left the chat. But I wanted to focus this part of the show on the agenda of the left and the policies we should be pushing Biden on and how we should be pushing Biden on. So first, let's focus on holding him accountable, because I feel like our first thing should be holding him accountable to what he promised, the concessions that he made to the Bernie Sanders campaign in that commission that was made when he consolidated the Democratic vote. So immediately, we need to hold him accountable for $15 minimum wage and the $2,000 stimulus that he's already kind of gone back on. Now, the reason is there's no excuse. These are two things that Joe Biden can do through reconciliation with the 51 majority they have in the Senate, with the majority they have in the House, and through his own action as commander, as the executive. So there's no excuse not to do these things and not to go all out with these things, because you can. Now, and because it's also what you promised. Now, the $15 minimum wage, he obviously put that inside of his proposal, and the only person on the Democratic side, really, that has recently shown hesitancy towards that, as well as the $2,000 stimulus, although Biden's wasn't a $2,000 stimulus, but we'll talk about that next. Only person who's shown hesitancy for higher wages is Marcus's favorite Democratic senator, Joe Manchin.
Oh, you mean
So Joe,
AKA the most important person in the Senate, in the entire government right now?
the most important person, the most crucial vote in the entire country right now is Joe Manchin's vote. So basically, all you need to understand is Joe Manchin lives in the poorest state, arguably one of the poorest states in the nation. Teachers' salaries actually are the lowest, like way below the second to last. They make less than 30 grand a year. So Joe Manchin lives in a very poor state, and he represents all of those people, and he's against living wage. He's against raising wages in a state that already has loopholes to get around the already set $7 minimum wage. So I think this is a time where we need to hold Biden accountable, because if there's anyone in the country who can convince Manchin to go along with this, it's Biden. There's no question in my mind. Joe Biden got elected to definitively do these two things: $2,000 stimulus and a $50 minimum wage, and we have to hold him accountable. Meaning, we have to have him pressure Manchin, because Manchin's not going to listen to us. Let's be real. Let's be 100% honest. Joe Manchin will never listen to the left. He already hates progressives. He tried to actually block a talk for a second stimulus last time around. They tried to send out a package that didn't include a stimulus check, and So Manchin's not going to listen to the people. He's not going to be pressured by really any politicians except for Democratic leadership and Joe Biden. So that's where the focus in the short term needs to be. Now that doesn't mean we take our eye off the long term goals, which I'll mention in a second. But in the short term, we need to hold them accountable for that $15 minimum wage because in an economy where people are doing bad, where people aren't spending as much outside, it would help a lot and it would put a lot more money into the community and into businesses if people had more money in their pockets. And I think you would also see mental health. You would see stress levels go down in those communities, and people would have more time, more foresight to think about crucial issues like politics, which I think people are stressed out. People have a lot of time on their hands, and it's not doing well for their mental health. So that might have manifested itself into a lot of things we saw in the past few months. Um, but yeah, Marcus, what do you want to say about $50 minimum wage? Because I know you have a few thoughts about our dear friend Joe Manchin.
Well, I think it needs to be done. The last time we had a
Yeah.
minimum wage increase was freaking almost 10 years, a decade ago, basically, at this
Mm-hmm.
point. Like, what are we doing? Like, there's so many people hurting, and it helps the entire economy. Trickle down economics doesn't work. When you just, and it's not even about dispersing the wealth or redistributing the wealth. It's about making sure that the lowest in the economy can contribute to the economy. Right now, they
Right.
can't contribute to the economy. All of their money goes to the basic needs of life. And all of that money that they are spending goes to the biggest corporations in the country. They go to Walmart for food, they go to the gas companies, big oil for cars, for gasoline. Uh,
And Amazon for everything else.
well, no, I doubt that they even can afford Prime at the lowest levels, right? And at least Amazon, right, for all the things that makes it evil, right? They have local sellers who sell on Amazon. So that's a travesty in itself that these people can't even afford to go out and get a Prime membership and get Amazon at this point.
Mm-hmm.
$15 minimum wage solves a lot of that. And when you look at the economic consequences of that, you don't see the the apocalypse that the conservatives are actually saying would occur. We've
Mm-hmm.
talked about this in the previous segment. You actually see prices increase very marginally, maybe like 5% max when you really look at it. Just because, this is the thing that gets me the angriest, right? When I just see lies on Facebook saying that the price of things will be 500% more.
Right.
It's not true. It's objectively not true. The cost of wages in most economic sectors, in most industries, is only 20% of business. If you increase that by 1%, because not everyone makes the minimum wage in a lot of industries. So we're talking about 1 to 2% increases in wages, which is
Right.
1/5 of the average business budget. So we're not talking about huge, like crazy, like substantial, like differences. No, we're talking about putting a little bit more money into the people that you hire to make your business succeed, right? It's a no-brainer. It's a win for the companies because they have employees who don't have to take two buses to get to work. They can maybe afford a car, or their neighborhood becomes wealthy, and
Mm-hmm.
people who are in charge of transportation become more aware of their neighborhoods because that's a huge problem. If you live in a poverty-stricken neighborhood, you're not going to get the transportation that you need. Maybe Pete Buttigieg can change that. We'll see. He's got 4 years,
Right. And
but
the sorry, finish up.
but not. It's a win for these companies. It's a win for the employees, and it's a win for society as a whole because that's how you get more small business when you have
Right.
more people who can afford to go to small business.
And that's a crucial point that whenever this is brought up, whenever $15 minimum wage is brought up, the biggest thing that people say against it, oh, it's going to hurt small business. It's going to hurt these small businesses. They're all going to go out of business, and they pull these numbers out of God knows where. They pull these numbers like 20% of small businesses are going to go out of business if they have to raise the minimum wage to $15 per hour. That's a bold-faced lie that has been proven to be wrong. Those numbers are based off of nothing.
They don't
Those are
calculate
funded.
the positive externalities.
Exactly, and they are funded. They are funded by people whose best interest is against raising the minimum wage. People forget that, and the just on basic logic, if you pay your workers more, if you pay your workers, sorry, the bare minimum what they should be paid, to the extent to where they're content or even happy to go to work, productivity goes up, which means that the work you put out, the products you put out, the services, what have you put out are better. Your customer service is better, which means people will likely want to come to your small business more, which and people will have more money in their hands, so they'll spend it on small businesses even more. So yes, I'm not saying this because is are some small businesses going to have a hard time in the beginning? Probably. I'm not gonna lie.
No, I don't.
Probably.
Honestly, if it was on a national scale, small businesses would be thriving
No, they would be thriving, but even
immediately.
like even a month afterwards, they would see the returns of that. Because like Marcus,
It
when you
would
get a raise,
literally
when
be
you get a
immediately.
promotion, like yeah, and that's what I'm saying. And people want to say that, oh well, it's gonna hurt. Well, it's gonna hurt these small businesses. It's a bold faced lie. And the thing is, people say this stuff also without ever citing the studies or where they came from, because it's just that's the other problem. We have so much misinformation out there. Most people are getting their information, and this is on the right and the left too, because I've seen it a lot. They get their information from memes or Reddit threads, and so they don't pay attention to like actual news. And a lot of people don't trust news, which is fine. But I think people need to start thinking a little harder for themselves. And this is what we try to do. We're not just talking at you. We hopefully are trying to drive a conversation, trying to help whoever's listening to maybe think for themselves. If you hadn't thought about this before, maybe Google it. Maybe look up some information. And try to look at some non-biased stuff. Try to look at individual studies and make it out for your own, whether or not you believe them. Now, the other thing, aside from $15 minimum wage, that we do need to hold Biden
Ooh, if I
accountable
could say
for.
one more thing about that, though,
Go ahead.
Yeah, and that what you were just saying goes to the point where politicians don't talk about the economics of the $15 minimum
Not at
wage.
all.
They talk about how it makes them feel, especially on the conservative side or
Right.
the middle side of the liberals, right? Or the middle, I should say, the dead center, like the Bidens, right? They talk about how this is going to hurt small businesses. It doesn't, right? Look at the economics. The economics of almost all liberal policies help the economy as a whole. Like one good example is that I think we're going to actually get hit on later in today's show is universal health care. It helps people and the economy. It helps everyone in the economy because it allows for more capitalism. It allows people to be actually free to switch jobs and allocate their labor in ways that they think are going to be more fruitful for them. They're not stuck in a job that just based on healthcare. There's so many almost every one of the policies that AOC and Bernie Sanders have are objectively good for the economy. It's just conservatives feel like everyone should do things on their own, which I just you're
It's
trying to screw everyone over so you can
it's
feel
that
good about
same
yourself.
it's that same mentality too that people have, where they say stuff like, well, I had to do it this way. I had to do it this way. So how is that fair to me? It's the same. Like, people make the argument about things like canceling student debt, or canceling, debt for people who went to trade school. Like, people say, well, I had to pay off my loans. I had to pay off my debt and all that kind of stuff. So why should other people get their debt forgiven? And on the face of it, you can say, so you want people in an already gig economy, in an economy that's already rigged, that's already trying to push people down, you want people to not take this path that would immediately alleviate a lot of the debt for most of society. And again, this is not a, yeah, sometimes if these national issues aren't going to affect you personally, but but here's the thing, you can never look at it like what is someone else getting that I'm not getting. Yeah, that's not a productive way to look at these kinds of things. Productive way is, okay, they're getting something. Is this going to help the overall economy? Are people going to be happier? Cool. All right, cool. Even if it doesn't affect you. But the thing is, this affects tens of millions of people. And I what I don't, because like, and it reminds me of stuff like, I don't mean to go into hyperbole, but like it reminds me of stuff like, like let's say, like, civil rights movement, right? People were saying that, it was crazy to think that like, black people would eventually, and brown people as well, would be equal to white people, and like, or we get to that point of equality. And people are thinking it's impossible to do that, and it's, and it's just like, I never got the idea. People always want to say like, oh well, we shouldn't fight for those things because they're impossible. It's just never, that thing has never resonated with me. Like, to say that something is impossible and not really state a fact to why it's impossible, and then just leave it at that. That's not good enough, and we should demand more from our Republicans in office, from our Democrats in office.
Absolutely.
I was waiting for that. So let's talk about the stimulus really quickly, and then we'll get into some of the more far left, or some of the more common sense left issues that we want to talk about. So Biden obviously came out with a plan that called for a $1,400 stimulus, which is $600 less than the stimulus that he ran on, and the senators, the newly elected senators rather, in Georgia ran on. So, Marcus, what was your initial reaction to this $1,400 number? Because Biden, it's funny. Biden did the very politician thing where he said he gave himself an out on beforehand, which was actually a very. I mean, politically it's a smart move, but ethically it's a pretty shitty move. To say that he said that this first stimulus bill that was passed in January was a down payment on future on future stimulus, and he kind of took that and was like, well, you guys already got $600, so we're gonna give you 1,400.
Well, I think it's a classic example of Democrats arguing, already like from the beginning of the debate, they just hit themselves right in the knee. You
Right.
know, like if he tried and he fought with Mitch McConnell for about 2 weeks, right, and it just wasn't going anywhere, and then he said, I tried, American people. He like he took a note from Bernie Mac and was like, America, I tried. I tried to get that $2,000, but we
Right.
did have $600 earlier, and I think $1,400 is a good compromise. I could see, I'd understand because it's hard. I think you should try to get some bipartisanship done,
Hmm.
but I think that you don't undercut your position before you start debating.
Well, yeah, and they've done a similar thing with this with the passing of the, or sorry, with the forgiving of student debt. Actually, if you look at it, like they've made a situation where Republicans obviously don't want to cancel anything, but then you have, on one hand, you have Chuck Schumer and Elizabeth Warren, who released a plan to forgive $50,000. And then you have Joe Biden, who is actively still saying that he only wants to cancel $10,000. Like, and here's the thing, I think Joe Biden's coming in from the position where, okay, this should, like, okay, I think this is something that the Republicans would go along with more. And I'm like, that shouldn't be your starting position. That's a dumb starting position to have. Your starting position, if I was Biden, my starting position would be cancel all student debt. And this is understanding that Joe Biden does not want to cancel all student debt. By the way,
Yeah.
I'm not in a false reality, but the smart move would be cancel all student debt. Say you want to cancel all student debt, and then Republicans push back. Have that 50 number, or even somewhere around there, be the compromise, and that's something that Democrats have always struggled with. And I don't understand. I don't understand how they have all this money, all this great comms work, and all this great consulting, and they don't understand how to negotiate with the Republicans who don't want to give them anything. And
Yeah.
I don't understand why they're not willing to like kind of be a little more Machiavelli, because honestly, in politics, when you're faced with all of these crises that we're facing, you have to be a little ruthless sometimes to get what you want, and to get the people what they need. you know
Absolutely.
and the Democrats, I feel like they struggle, or they are faced with this issue that sometimes they think being right, or being correct, or somewhat correct, mostly correct in the grand scheme of things, is enough to get their argument across, and it's just not. Like
It
like
really is not.
it's not like there's no reason why there should be I believe a study came out to show like 30% of Americans still think that Social Security and Medicaid and Medicare are bad programs. I'm like, there's no reason for that. Like the Republicans are actually beating you in consulting. They're beating you in negotiating. They're beating you in all of these actual political strategy points. How? Because you guys get more money, you get more votes, you get more support. How is this happening? So I think the Democratic establishment, the leadership, they need to do a massive overhaul. And that's just, we gotten very far away from pushing Biden, right? But I don't want this to turn into a rant on the DNC because we're trying to actually provide some common sense solutions that would help in the immediate future and the distant future. Um,
Now, me personally, when it comes to student loan debt and Biden's approach, I'm not as critical as I'm surprisingly for myself. I'm not. I'm not as critical as I
oh,
thought I
you
would
aren't
be.
now.
No, I'm not actually. I think it depends on what he does because
Right.
Elizabeth Warren came out with some very concrete arguments saying that he can basically do whatever the heck he wants when it comes to student loan debt, and it's
Mm-hmm.
true. You know, Trump's education secretary Betsy DeVos didn't signed, but also did not sign a letter after she resigned her position, saying that Biden couldn't do that. But when you look at it from any kind of constitutional or law aspect, he actually can. The Secretary of
Yeah.
Education has the ability to cancel any student debt. Now, if he canceled all student debt held by the government without legislation, that would be a bold move. I don't think Biden's willing to do that. I think Biden is saying 10 because that's as much as he's willing to do. And if that's true, then I think we get the benefit of the doubt on that because that's still tremendous. Also, I do think that canceling someone with $100,000 in student debt isn't fair to the unprivileged people who didn't have the credit worthiness to get up to 110 in debt, who
Oh,
didn't have
I
the
don't know if you've
economic
I don't know if you've
opportunity.
seen I don't know if you've seen the some of the cosign agreements that go along with these student debts. It's actually outrageous. So, like I would we can talk about this more long form later because we have a bunch of other stuff we need to get to. But like literally, if colleges and the federal government can make you a loan, if you can sign that paper, they'll find a way to get that.
Absolutely, but I think it's unfair for, you know, as much as there are cases where underprivileged people find themselves in $200,000 in student loans. The vast majority of those people are people who go to grad school and can afford the opportunity cost of not working, and they tend to be more wealthy. I think that it should be means tested if you want to go more than I'd say 30K. But that's just my opinion.
Right.
I
Okay.
wouldn't actively fight it,
Right.
but I don't want to
Okay.
waste political capital on it.
Right. Okay. I disagree, but we'll leave it at that for now. So let's talk about actual issues that we can push Biden left on and push and put pressure on and fight for. I put together a list of a few policy positions that I think are most prominent in the next 2 years because the Democrats have a very short window, and we know through history that this window can close very quickly of getting policies done and getting some bolder policies through. And the job of the left in this is to pressure the Democrats to use their political will, their political capital, and also pressure all elected leaders to come out and end up supporting and voting for these things and advance these policies. So, and these are in no particular order. And there are policies that like I didn't mention, but these are some of the ones I believe that I think during the Biden administration we can actually move forward on. The first one I want to talk about is police reform. So we saw with over the past summer the George Floyd protests and President Trump's response to it. President Biden though has not had a very a very loud response or a very he hasn't reached out. Quite frankly, he has not reached out to those communities in a valid way. Has he said some of the right things? Sure. Has he gone to churches and given speeches? Yes. But has he proposed fundamental policies that would help those people, that would help people in those situations, that would reform the police? You can call it defund the police, you can call it reform. To me, the name in that aspect does not matter, because it's more about getting that policy done. That's the main aspect. We need to have better police training. We need to have less money for police to actually be spending on guns and ammunition and tanks. We need to have that money dispersed into other areas, social workers and other people who can deal with those issues, and train police to be you know act problem solvers instead of problem creators. Ending qualified immunity, very silent on that. These are things that, like, we had an entire protest. We had an entire country in protest over the summer. And again, it was just this, I'm sorry, this BS virtue signaling that everyone's been doing for years. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer took a knee in the Capitol, and everyone was fawning over it. MSNBC was like, "Oh, this is such a great moment for Black people in this country." While Black people all throughout this country and brown people were in the streets,
Yep.
were in the streets begging for them to do something,
Yeah.
to do something with their power, instead of just displaying, these random acts of solidarity that weren't really solidarity, because they weren't advancing any policy. There was a small group of people, Justin Amash, the only libertarian at the time in Congress, actually put forward with Ayanna Pressley the act to end qualified immunity. And for those who don't know, qualified immunity, ending it would actually hold police who kill people and who harm innocent people. They would hold them to account, because right now there's a lot of protections for those individuals. So that's something immediately that we need to push the Democratic Party on, because it's one of those things. The time for saying that the Republicans are in the way, it's over. There's really no excuses for something like that to not be done.
And full disclosure, I worked at a police station. I was an intern in the records department, and I spent a lot of time with the police in my local community, and uh, I've grown to respect a lot of the police officers that you know, basically grew up around. I was in high school, right? And they had my back, and I had their back, and I think something that would have huge, tremendous effects, right? You got to keep the training money. You got to, I don't know how much you can practically defund, especially in local municipalities. And also the political will, I don't think, is there when it comes down to it, right? In the heat of the moment, you can get polling on that to rise significantly. But when it comes down to saying it and putting it on the ballot in referendums, it's a lot harder getting elected officials to come out on the record to do that, and then something bad happens. It's hard to get it to happen. I think a policy that would really change things is if police lived where they police. These out-of-towners come in, and they don't respect the people that they are taking oaths to protect. They don't respect them. That's the problem. Mm-hmm. You don't go to someone you respect and you shoot them 7 times in the chest. You don't do that. When you know the people on your block and you're policing them and you're supporting them and you're serving them, that's something that really makes a difference. And every officer that I really just, I don't want to say fell in love with, but like every officer that I've gained respect for lived where they policed. I mean, there are exceptions. There's good people who come out of town, and then come in. But like the ones who really made an impact on me and other youth are the people who live in the communities, who you see at church, who you see at the grocery store, right? When they're walking down the street, they might not be wearing a badge and a uniform because they live there. They walk their dogs there. They have family there. They care about the community. That's the problem. That's the core of it, right? You can throw all the money you want at it. You can throw all the training you want at it. But if you have officers who don't respect the people that they police, you're going to get these problems every day, every week, every year. We're going to be in the streets. Every freaking day we're going to be marching because someone else just got shot. If Biden really wants to make a change, he should give grants to communities who have requirements that officers live where they police.
And and going along with that, even like the entire idea, because I do agree with you on that respect, that we need to have more community kind of policing, people within the community making the rounds in their neighborhoods. That would actually be a positive step in reform. But I think the reason people like to talk about, and I especially do am very much for, like, this whole notion of defunding the police, when it's, again, you can disagree with what it's saying. It's, in my opinion, I don't believe that that's the best way to frame it, because it just now has a very terrible connotation with it. Uh, but regardless, if that's what gets that type of policy passed, then sure, yes, I'm for it. But the entire premise of it is to take money from police, that's extra money, that's really not, because there's, like you said, there's only so much money you can throw into policing and punitive systems that's actually going to take effect. What would really help would be to put more money into these communities, put more money into education, into after school programs, into reform programs for youth, and maybe try fixing our really broken jailing and prison system. Things like that would lessen crime, and would decrease the need for these forceful actions, and would decrease the need, the the feeling that many Republicans get, that the police need to protect themselves and arm themselves so much. Like, if you do take measures to decrease crime, you won't even need that. So it's, again, these are things that are actually so simple when you think about them, but they just get muddled because people like to throw these buzzwords at them, like, oh, they want to defund all police, they want to get rid of police, abolish the police. Like, yeah, great, yeah, totally. Every leftist wants to abolish the police because, yeah, we don't want to be able to call anyone in case of an emergency. That's totally
The
what we
only thing
mean.
we want to abolish is ICE. That was created out of sheer panic after 9/11. For it serves no purpose. Let's get rid
Big
of ICE.
facts.
Everything else, nah, man. We need our police. We need, you know, especially after
We need to,
especially after January 6th. We need our blue line.
yeah, but we also need reform. There needs there needs to be a meeting of the two at some point.
Absolutely, but
Um,
I think that reform also comes in the form of judges. If you really care about saving,
that's true.
saving your community, elect good judges who aren't just going to throw books at minorities because that's what gets them elected. Read about your judges. You know what? Request that they get interviewed. Local papers don't care. Make local papers care. You want good
Facts.
reform, you get good judges, and then you won't see white offenders get 1/10 the time of black offenders in some cases.
Moving on. The next policy issue I want to talk about is HR 40. HR 40, for those who don't know, is to establish a commission and to study the development of reparations proposal for African Americans. And the reason I put this in here is because it's something that is simple. It's something that can be done very easily. Like, this is, and honestly, like, if we're being totally honest, it really doesn't do much as far as actual spending money on reparations or any of that. But what it does, though, do is advance the conversation, and that's something that needs to be done and is way long overdue. Because all you're doing in this is establishing a commission to find out what reparations would be. Because right now there's a lot of discussions going on, and in like black communities, and about what reparations is. And this would be a good start to finding out. This would be a good organized start to finding out what those actually are, and this would give African Americans the ability to understand and know what they are. And that's important when we're having this larger discussion about reparations. Is it going to be money? Is it going to be land grants? Is it going to be reform? Like, even something like police reform could be uh, bunched in that. Like, thing is, we don't know, and we won't know until we start actually.
Actually, I think we're having a problem with your audio. Oh, hello, Omar.
I'm.
Okay,
Can you
we
hear me?
we we got him back. Perfect.
Okay, where did I cut out?
Uh, yeah. We lost you about about 20 seconds ago. We lost the last 20 seconds of what you said.
Great. All right. HR 40. But we need to find out, basically, HR 40 is about finding out what reparations would be, having these discussions on the ground, and, organizing the communities to understand what they are and just move the conversation forward. Again, this is not something that's radical. This is not something that's going to completely change the outcomes and all phases of the economy, like people want to say. Like, this is literally just finding out what we're talking about when we're talking about reparations. And it's a very meaningful step, in my opinion. And it's something that, like I said, long overdue, can be easily done. So there's no reason not to do it. Even if you're a Republican, there's no reason not to find out what reparations are, because all this time we have like all these white people, like literally, like, we have all these white people in the Senate, these white Republicans talking about how, oh well reparations means money. I'm like, how do you know that? Okay, first of all, how do you know that? Have you studied this? No, you haven't. Have your interns in your office studied this? No, no, not to the extent that it should be studied. Why don't we, as a government, as a nation, put together a commission made up of organizers, made up of people of color, made up of African Americans, to actually find out what this means? Very easy. Biden's been mute on it, apparently. And it's, again, something that I think this is a doable step. I think we could definitely pass this very quickly in the next 2 years, like even less than the next 2 years. It's going to be done very quickly if we put pressure on Biden.
Yeah. I'm not sold.
Why not?
Well, honestly, um, I think it's an out in a way. When you have these committees, I think they tend to focus more on, especially right now we have all Democratic government, right?
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I'd rather see it under Republican government or a mixed government. I think that we'd get a more honest evaluation. I think what's going to happen now is Democrats are going to pander and use identity politics to wedge this issue, right? I think,
Well, they're going to do it anyway.
yeah, that's true. I don't like the whole concept. Now, if you're talking about targeted policies that fix the mistakes of America's past, I am 100% in. If you want
Right.
to give black, see, then that's what I'd hope would come out of this commission. But I'm not confident in Democratic leadership actually doing that. I think it's
And
just gonna be like, let's give black people $100, and then Republicans are gonna be like, that's stupid. We're not gonna do
I
that,
understand that.
and it's
I
just gonna
understand that.
devolve.
I understand that. But the whole, so, and you're right, actually. I think there's going to be a lot of performative politics going into this, and it's going to be made into a spectacle. And but the thing is, if we don't have this first step, I don't think we're not going to actually get to any point where we could see, like, large substantive policies that address specifically the issue of reparations ever.
Well, there's things we
Like,
could do.
no,
We know what we
but
can do.
Marcus, they're never. But Marcus, we're never gonna find out what. Like, here's the thing. But we're never gonna have a consensus about what they are.
Oh no, we could have a
And
consensus in a heartbeat if we did the correct policies. If we set up a Veterans Affairs bureau, right, that would go in and see which veterans coming out of World War II
mhm.
were discriminated against and weren't allowed to go to college, and we gave their families, all of their descendants, ability to go to college, bam, instant,
How do you do that,
instant.
Marcus? How do you do that though?
It's they
Through a commission.
well, I don't,
That's one of the ways to do it.
that's one of the ways you do it, or you directly do it, right? Because
Right.
that
But
directly, if
Marcus,
you do
no
that
one's gonna
directly,
directly do it.
no,
Marcus.
if you do that directly, Republicans are in, right? Just right there, no one takes veterans benefits are the most sacred thing in this country, right? And at times in this country's history, they weren't. Now, I think if went back and we corrected that, if we did that for the GI Bill, if we
Hmm.
did that for housing benefits, all the veterans who are redlined, and that's very easy to prove. You just it's very easy to see VA records are pretty much intact on who used their benefits on these two
Okay.
issues, right?
Right.
Because there's people who are still eligible for that, and there's actually people in the VA who are getting pensions from the Civil War up until last year. Then their descendants finally died. Well, I don't
Right.
want to say finally, but they eventually died. This
Right.
long, they've lived great lives, And I'm glad that they lived so long. I wish they would have lived more, but now they are unfortunately dead. When I say finally, but like there are there are things you can do. You want to talk? You want to fix all of this? You let like Kamala Harris said, you let those little black boys and those little black girls go to any school that they want, no matter what their property tax they pay. They go to any school a white kid can go to. That solves these issues immediately. It gets generational wealth in the hands of blacks, and it doesn't alienate the rest of the country. It's something that
Right.
Republicans will have to spend a lot of capital to go against, right? That's what we need. We need issues that are no-brainer wins. We don't need something that muddies the water.
But right, and I get your point, but well, so the way I see it, and the way that it's been presented to me is this would also allow for or like organizers and the African American communities to have more organized conversations amongst themselves about not only reparations, right? Not it wouldn't just be reparations with them. They would also be talking about how to like empower their community, how to better their community. And like I do see your points because at the end of the day, it's there's a good chance that it would just turn to spectacle and just identity ran like peddling to identity politics. But my thing is I just don't see a path to a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, and I could be wrong, but I don't see a path to a lot of stuff you're talking about without like something in between to kind of gain momentum.
And
And
I just don't think Biden's going to be the one who does it. I mean, I might be pleasantly surprised, but
well,
I'm very
not if we
skeptical.
don't not if we don't push him on it. But we'll get to that. Next thing, I'm gonna run through this next one very quickly. Ending union busting because we kind of covered it. Amazon spent sending out Pinkerton men to spy on people who are trying to unionize. They're trying to keep the workforce down, trying to keep them in deplorable labor conditions. It's not just them; it's almost every organization, every company out there. So, just very quick on that. We already talked about this. If you want to hear more about that, go into the beginning of the video. Um, so that's one issue that I think we need to be fighting on because Biden has positioned himself as a pro union person, as a pro
Yeah.
union candidate, and he's a tough guy from Scranton, Pennsylvania. He knows how to get to the working class, so we need to pressure him on unions. Next thing, Medicare for all, Medicare for all, and again, we've talked about this. I don't see Medicare for all passing actually right now in this climate for a number of years. But it's not. But that doesn't mean we have to be silent. That doesn't mean we have to just like let time pass. We have to demand it. We have
I've,
to demand it every single day.
if,
40 million people in this country were uninsured. 40 million additional people are underinsured. We spend the most. Here's the thing: we spend more per capita than any other major country, but we still have all of those people who are uninsured and underinsured. Really think about that. That is insane. 14 million people lost their health care because of the pandemic. And it showed this. It showed, you mentioned this earlier too. It showed how connected this ID, the healthcare is to your employer. And it really, I think we miss an opportunity. We really miss an opportunity because and we'll do a deep dive into the problems that led to the end of the Bernie Sanders 2020 campaign, but there is an alternative universe where Bernie Sanders gets elected, this pandemic happens, right? And everyone sees it. The conversations, the spin that people had that, oh well, Medicare for all would take away your health care. It would take away your private insurance that you get through your employer. And don't you love that? When 14 million people lost their employer-based health care, I think we're living in a different climate. Not saying it solves all the issues, but it gets a lot more people behind it, and that's what you need. We need more people actively behind it. Now, as far as Biden goes, obviously he wants to go around the route of expanding Obamacare and expanding the existing programs, and they just don't go far enough to address the needs that we have. We need to have Medicare for all. We need to come into the rest of the developed world in this matter, and we need to provide people with their basic necessities they need. It's not again, none of these are hugely radical issues. They are pretty much common sense. Next one, we're gonna go through HR 1, which is the For the People's Act. introduced by Ro Khanna, or sorry, not introduced by Ro Khanna, I believe. I believe this was John Sarbanes, my congressman, actually. Big shout out to John Sarbanes. Um, so this basically would create publicly funded elections. It would account for campaign finance reforms like nonpartisan gerrymandering. So districts would be more aligned with the communities, and representatives would represent communities they actually live in. Take away dark money from super PACs, so you know where the money is. It would end a lot of the corporate money that's coming in. It would require presidential and vice presidential candidates to disclose tax returns or maybe NDAs they have. We're talking to you, Bloomberg. Um, it would also help with the voting rights. It would create an entire registration program. It would make election day an official holiday, replace, again, like I said, partisan gerrymandering, and limit efforts to purge voting polls, which we've seen multiple times. So I think that there's a lot of stuff there. Like I said, it's common sense, but again, we have an entire machine fighting against it. Now, a lot of people are going to ask, why should mainstream Democrats come to some of these positions? Why should they follow through, or why should they even consider these when they have no incentive to change anything? And the answer to that question is power. If the Democrats don't act boldly from these positions that a lot of the American people, most of these positions, the majority of the American people are supportive of, they're going to lose power. And don't take my word for it. Look back at history. 1994, the 1994 midterms, right after Bill Clinton was elected, Democrats lost big after gaining all three, the House, the Senate, and the presidency after 3 terms of Bush and Reagan. They lost big. Republicans got the first House majority they had in decades, and that's the beginning of this partisan gridlock that we've seen. That's the origins of it. 2010, Democrats lost the House and the Senate on the heels of Obama's victory. And here's the thing: people like to say, "Well, Obama didn't do anything bold. He didn't do anything, or he did. Well, Medicare for all was a bold action." Is what they're saying. They say Medicare for all was a bold action, and to that I say, but it had major problems. One, people didn't know how to get it. They didn't know if they had access to it. It wasn't rolled out properly. Two, it brought insurance companies in as partners. And when you're doing that, you're undermining exactly what you're trying to create, which is healthcare for everybody, because they want to get the most bang out of their buck. You know, over time premiums will go up. These were it was just a bad policy. The penalty, it was a huge negative looking back at it. It didn't incentivize people to want to get Obamacare. All it did was create this more resentment for it, because people had to either pay a penalty or sign up for this healthcare that, in all intents and purposes, wasn't good for them. Basically, it was a timid approach to a brazen problem that required bold action. And in 2020, we're seeing a lot of the same things. Democrats won the presidency after 4 years of a fascist wannabe authoritarian. The Senate, they won that. They have control of the House. What's the approach they're going to take here? Do they go with the timid approach that they've had and that's lost them every single midterm right after that? Or do they take the other bold approach of considering these policies and actually enacting some of these policies that would actually substantively change the material conditions that we live in? Marcus, what do you think?
Well, I think in a lot of aspects. Oh, sorry, I got a little close to the camera there.
A little too close. A little too
Just
close.
admiring your face over there.
I'll appreciate it.
But nah, I think it's another example of Biden already arguing from the middle. I
Yeah.
think personally, I think public option is a good first step, right? It's further than Obamacare went in '09, and it gets everyone the availability of healthcare. But
Are you talking about Pete's Medicare for all who want it?
uh, not really. I'm just talking about giving people a free public option, right? Like,
Okay.
I don't. Mayor Pete, you know, he does what he does. I just, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if he actually. I don't really know what he actually believes on a lot of things, and I really don't know what he believes on his Medicare for all who want it policy either.
I
So
don't think he knows what he believes on that policy.
well, he knows what he believes. I just don't know what he's publicly saying that he believes. So I don't want to associate myself with that.
Yeah, dude, Mayor Pete's honestly, well, we'll talk about Mayor Pete and his dad and his relationship with the left at another juncture. But Mayor Pete was,
In his
when
town,
you
I'd
look at
say. That's
what
something we got to talk about is his relationship with his town.
his,
Yeah.
maybe we'll do a special episode on that. But yeah, I mean, as you were saying, like Marcus, what do you think the outlook is though for 2022? How do the do you see the Democrats actually enacting any of these bold um, options that I've just laid out that we need to push them on,
I
do you see a path for them like winning? I'm sorry, without enacting any of these.
well, I think I don't even want to get close to spectating or speculating on who's going to win. I don't even know who the candidates are going to be.
Well,
I'm
I'm
you
talking about
know
2022. I'm talking about
I
the midterms.
2022. Well,
Yeah, I'm talking about the midterms
yeah.
because, like I said, the pattern is whether it was Clinton, Obama, the recent pattern is Democrats win everything, don't take bold action in the 2 years they have the majority, and they lose.
I think it depends a lot on the collective memory of Trump. You
Mm.
know, Trump and
I think that's fading very fast. Actually, we're seeing it's fading pretty fast.
well, I think it's too early to tell
Oh yeah,
because uh, we're seeing it fade, but it's fading from something that was literally 2 weeks ago to something that is today. I
yeah,
think
fair.
it depends on the messaging. It depends on a lot of different factors. Messaging of the both left and the right, right? So that's something that we're going to have to see. Um, I, 2022, I
Like,
think the Democrats could still win.
but what
Um,
are they running on? Because the thing is, before they had Trump to run against, that was their whole thing in 2018, 2020. They had Trump to run against. If you're not going to offer any substantive, bold policy things to run on and to show as evidence of what you did and what you might do moving forward, then what are you running on? Because
well, it's not.
uh,
We haven't even
because
had Biden have his 100 days. I think let's see what he does,
but
and
but
then
Marcus, you even admitted though that you don't see a lot of these outcomes that I've laid out actually going anywhere with Biden, and we don't like
yeah.
other than stimulus, like which is like the only really substantive thing, and even that is lacking in some areas. But the only real substantive thing he can probably say in his first 100 days that he's going to accomplish, other than like all those executive orders that undid everything Trump did, is that enough to
Um,
really get people energized in 2022?
well, it depends on how quick if he can fix the COVID vaccine scenario.
Yeah.
That's something that will heavily factor in. If he can stabilize the economy, that'll be something that factors in. It really just depends on where we're at, and it's still going to depend on where we're at, even a month before this election. We're living in very volatile times. Remember 2016. The factors, there were October surprises all over the place.
Mm.
2018, not so much, but still, there were surprises that really changed the factors of different things. And in 2020, especially, COVID was a huge, it was a whole summer and it became a fall surprise as well. And I think it really just depends if Biden sticks to his centrist policies, but gets a single like win, whether it be infrastructure, whether it be uh, the economy turning up again, whether it be real jobs coming back, $15 minimum wage. If he can get one win, I think he can play the heck out of it. And with the shadow of Trump still looming in the Republican Party, I think that the Democrats have a good shot in 2022, especially in the Senate, where they got a pretty good solid lineup going for
Yeah.
2022.
Yeah, the Senate isn't what I'm worried about. I'm more worried about the House in that respect because you
Absolutely,
lose one of them. The other two at this point really don't matter.
absolutely.
Um, and that's why I think it's important to push them. And I think more important than anything, we dealt for the past 4 years with the progressives and the left, especially. We dealt with getting kind of stabbed by people on every side of politics. Democrats, centrists, Republicans, far right fascists. Everyone was like, "Oh my God, these Bernie Bros, these Antifas, these commies, like whatever they wanted to call people on progressive left."
Well,
And
absolutely. And I think there's so many fronts open right now. There's so much pressure on these centrist Democrats that
for
we're
sure,
going to get a win. And
balls in their court.
that we're
That's the
going to
biggest
get a
thing. The
win on
balls in their
something.
court.
I
Yeah.
don't know what it's going to be, but they have to give us a win on something, especially if we keep this pressure going.
See, here's the thing. I don't know if they're inclined to, Marcus. I don't.
Oh,
I
it's not them. It's us. We are the ones who have to do it.
Right, but how do we do it? And I think that's a crucial question that, like, I know we're going very long on this, but I do want to get to, like, how some of the steps of how we do it. And when we're talking about this, I think the biggest thing and the biggest overall thing is obviously organizing. Now, biggest thing is, what does that mean? Other than, like, organizing protests on big issues like the killing of innocent people, the killing or the terrible medical care system we have, forced to vote, whatever. Other than that kind of big picture stuff, how do we put pressure on our politicians? Well, it's easy. Well, not easy. Sorry, it's not easy.
Well,
It's
it's
not
simple.
easy.
It's not easy, but it's
simple
simple.
to it's simple for me to kind of explain. There's steps you can take. Literally having community meetings, like even something though that small, community meetings. What's important in your community? What do you want to work on? Taking it from the local level. Those kinds of things make it different. That's part of organizing. Other things like other more bigger picture things, unionizing, working on that. And that goes kind of with this community aspect I was talking about. If you're working for a big company and you are getting maligned, you're not getting that $15 minimum wage, you're not getting paid hazard pay during a pandemic, things like that, then it's up to you to start talking with your coworkers about unionizing. And there's a lot of union busting that goes on. And it's very difficult to talk about. But that's also why we need to put pressure on members of Congress. And there's a few ways to do that even. There's a traditional, call your congressperson, leave a message, all that kind of stuff. That doesn't hit as hard though as hitting them where it's the worst, which is their vote. Hitting them with your vote, sorry. Because if you start to support more progressive candidates, more leftist candidates, that's when you are at your most powerful as a voter,
Absolutely.
because that's either going to force the centrist farther left on an issue that you care about, that your community has come up that you care about, or it's going to have them fold, and they're probably going to lose if those things aren't addressed.
And one of the last things I'll say about actually it might be one of the last things I say in the show. We're coming pretty close.
We are
Uh,
really coming close.
we gave up that second break for you guys. But one of this is the last thing I'll probably say for the day, and it'll pretty much sum everything that I've set up. We've, you know, everyone in high school who goes through a government class or a history class learns about PEMS: political, economic, military, social. And unfortunately, people who will hold our beliefs, we don't hold political power in this country. We don't hold the economic power in this country yet as well. Clearly, as you can see with my brown T-shirt, I'm not holding the economic power. but and we're not like Trumpists. We're not going to raid the Capitol and form our own military to try to take over as a coup. Our only option is to take societal changes and strive for that. We have to reach out from on a societal standpoint to the different economic classes that aren't doing real good right now. That whether that be black or white, yellow or red or green or blue or whatever color you are, whatever identity you have, we need to go and reach out to these people and say, hey, things aren't going great for America right now. We need to do things that will objectively improve everyone's economic situation. And that's
Right.
what Obama did. That's what Obama said he would do in '08. And that's how we win, is when we make those arguments. But now it's time to fulfill the promises.
Right. Right. And it's time for them to fulfill the promises, but it's more so on us to pressure them to. And I think another thing that we need to remember, especially those of us in this fight, is that understand we're not going to win every battle. That's just the truth of it. We're not going to, odds are, like, not like I promise you in the next 4 years, everything on that list is not going to get passed unless there's like some miracle, unless there's some coming like there's some premonition moment or this where the moderate Democrats see the light. I don't see it happening, but that does, and we need to understand that the system is working against all of the policy agendas that I just laid forward, and there's only to an extent to where we can organize. We saw what happened with the George Floyd protests. The entire country was protesting for against police brutality and for police reform. Nothing got done. Like, we have a system designed against Medicare for all. Bernie Sanders, and we had a system designed against Medicare for all. We had people, the only argument, and they called it substantive, the only argument against Medicare for all was Bernie Sanders is going to take away your health care. That was the main argument the media said. That was the main argument that was coming out of the mouths of every centrist Democrat. And instead of and they focused on that instead of focusing on the fact that there were millions of people who were uninsured and underinsured. When we're working against a system like that, it's important to remember that we need to keep moving forward, and we're not going to win all the time, but I was going to quote Martin Luther King here. However, there's that seems to be like like everyone's kind of doing it nowadays, because MLK Day was this past week, but and I don't want to misquote or mischaracterize anything Dr. King said, so I'm just gonna say something that I kind of take away and kind of paraphrase a little bit, and it's to the extent we shouldn't not be doing something because we believe it to be impossible, or we've been told it's impossible, but if we believe that it is good and just and genuinely for the betterment of all of us in society, no matter our gender, creed, sexual orientation, religion, class standing, no matter all of that, then it's our duty as citizens in this society to keep pushing forward. Start the fire, build the movement that will carry on beyond your time with the intention of carrying the message as well. So it's a long fight, but we need to be in it for a long haul.
I'll say it again. I've said it so many times. Absolutely.
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 We're gonna take a quick break and wrap up everything after this with Marcus and myself. If you haven't already, remember to subscribe, hit that notification bell, hit that like button. We'll be back after a break.
Oh man. Yeah, we'll be right back after this break. That will take about 3 minutes, actually. That's what we'll do.
Yeah.
We'll take a 3.
Follow me on Twitter, by the way, at @OmerQ_, right there. Right there. It says it right there.
Yep, that's it. You got it.
There we go. All right, we are back here on the Omer Q show. We're going to end it with a video from podcaster, YouTuber, and alleged leftist Tim Pool, who had a very interesting reaction to Jacobin's latest cover. Let's take a listen.
Biden being president, and this glorious image from Jack.
Sorry, we got some slight technical difficulties. I've just got to hit one more button here. All right, let's play the video. Oh yeah, there's the technical difficulties.
Yeah, we can definitely hear it now.
All right.
Biden being
Let's go.
president, and this glorious image from Jacobin magazine. Now, I'll tell you what I find particularly fascinating about this is Jacobin is like socialist, like their DSA. Many are there's like communism. They get their name from the French Revolution, and they
Untrue.
put a cover out, and it's Joe Biden as Jesus with the sun behind his head, literally imagery of Jesus, and there are people below him like looking up and cheering and worshiping him, and there's angels filming and interviewing him. What are these people thinking?
Oh my
Stop
God.
with this obsession with putting people above yourself and putting all the responsibilities and all your failures and all your hopes into one person and take some gosh darn personal responsibility for yourself.
But when you have a media ecosystem that is acting like Joe Biden is literally Jesus, then I don't see how we actually solve.
Oh my
problems.
God, he's so
Hold on,
serious.
just to clarify my point, Joe Biden could do really horrible things, and they don't care. But it's funny because they say the same thing about Donald Trump. This is people worshiping Jesus Biden, who hasn't done anything.
Oh my God.
What did he do?
He slammed
defeated the
Tara
devil.
Reid up against the wall.
Yeah, he
and,
defeated the devil. There you
So
go.
I think we could probably end it right there. Wow. Okay, so Tim Pool was 100% serious when he did that. And for those who don't know, Jacobin is a very far left, like socialist, like very socialist magazine. They criticize Biden on the daily. They've been criticizing him even before he ran for president. Like, so I don't know. There's only two things that could explain this. And first of all, I want to say, like he said that Jacobin was named after the French Revolution. That's not true. It was actually named after the Jacobins in the Haitian Revolution. So he didn't even do that bit of research. That just proves he doesn't know what he's talking about. Secondly, this is the type of reactionary analysis that's just lazy and unhelpful, because we do reactionary analysis a lot. This is reactionary analysis, what I'm doing right now. But I know what I'm talking about. I know that Tim Pool means exactly what he just said there, and I know the context of that image. That cover is a satirical cover that has Joe Biden being fawned over by the mainstream media. Jacobin is not part of the mainstream media. The mainstream media has actually gone out of its way to kind of label Jacobin as a communist magazine. Like, so they are not part of this ecosystem of Biden fawners that he wants to talk about. It's not true. If Pool had even clicked on their website and not even read an article, I'm not even asking you to do that. Just look at the headlines, my dog. Just do a little research, know what you're talking about, and you wouldn't have looked as dumb as you did. And that's what he is. He looks dumb.
And that's why I love you, man. I love doing the show with you, because we can talk about things. We both are informed on the policies enough that we can disagree and we can respect each other. And we can actually do a deep dive into these issues, even if it brings us a little over time, just a little bonus extra content,
Yeah.
Much love.
Well, we are way over time, and I want to thank everyone for watching. Huge, everyone. Round of applause for Marcus. Tired, dizzy, sleepy, everything. You did a great job today. Thank you so much for helping me. We really appreciate it, man.
Well, thank you for having me.
As always, and we'll be here next week. On the 30th, I think.
That's 23 plus 7. Yeah, 30. Yes.
Yeah, there we go. We'll see you end of January. We'll close it out with something special. I don't know what we're gonna do yet, but stay tuned. Follow me on Twitter. Follow the show OQ Politics on Facebook, and give a huge shout out to Marcus. We'll see you next week.